Hello, I'm Bliznub and welcome to Building the Best. Today we're going to be looking at the Telos Boltor and the Secura Penta. Well, the first thing I want to do with the Telos Boltor is compare it to its cousins, the Boltor and the Boltor Prime. And comparing it here to the Boltor, we can see it's got about twice as much damage and the other stats are similar, but upgraded. The reload, magazine, fire rate, the critical multiplier, they're all slightly better. The only real downside is that we lose that 10% status chance on the Boltor. Now if we compare it to the Boltor Prime, however, you can see that the Telos Boltor is actually falling short. It's got less damage, less status chance, less of everything in fact other than the magazine size. And that's really quite important because the accuracy hit here means that the Telos Boltor cannot really run heavy caliber without losing a substantial amount of accuracy, because accuracy should be above 20 to be able to hit enemies at a significant distance. And if you put heavy caliber on the Telos Boltor, clearly it will lose that, whereas the Boltor Prime can take that accuracy hit easily and still keep going and being point accurate at a substantial distance. So let's go back to the Telos Boltor and see just how we can build it. Obviously, with any puncture weapon, we're going to start off with our 2 damage mods, Serration and Split Chamber, and then Piercing Caliber. And as the status chance is so low, we actually do not want element plus status chance mods. So we're going to go for cryo rounds, and I would like to put shred on this build as well, because I believe the punch through will make it better for crowd clear, and the fire rate obviously will improve this thing's damage per second. So we're going to put on not rhyme rounds but thermite rounds to finish this build off, as blast damage is effective at causing crowd control and cuts through Grenier and Corpus fairly well. Let's test this out, as it is quite a high damage punch weapon, pumping out about 500 base damage. We're going to take it to an exterminate on Pluto, find some nice high corpus enemies. We can see that punch damage going to work on their shields and armor. Like I say, I think this weapon is a bit of a downgrade from the Boltor Prime, to be honest, especially considering that most people at this stage in the game would, when they're considering getting a syndicate rifle, would probably already have Boltor Prime with a couple former on it. There you see the lovely Telos syndicate effect going off. And that Cindy Bomb is a gas proc, actually, which is a bit disappointing, as gas is one of the least effective elemental damage types in the game, only having bonuses against the weaker infested enemies. We can see, however, that Telos Boltor is handily chewing through these corpus. They're not really presenting much of a challenge to it, despite us being on Pluto. The Syndicate Bomb also provides a 25% restore to your health on effect, and a 25% boost to your parkour. And whilst I haven't checked, I haven't experimented to find out, but I would imagine that means that your bullet jump goes 25% further and your wall hang lasts 25% longer, etc. So we can see here, yeah, the Telos Boltor, sorry, not the Boltor Prime, is chewing through these enemies with relative ease, and there's not too much to say about that. I would not say this weapon is going to see much use in raids, as whilst having a Cindy Bomb is nice, the Boltor Prime actually pumps up quite a lot more damage. And is, well, most people are going to look at their Boltor Prime that's probably sitting on 4 former and a catalyst and decide the Telos Boltor simply isn't worth the effort. So let's move on then to the more interesting of the 2 weapons we're looking at this week, the Secura Penta, which, whilst I'm loading in, we'll just say has a radiation syndicate bomb, which restores 25% of your shields and then temporarily buffs your shields by 50%. Meaning it increases the base amount of shields you can have by 50%. It does not actually refill them. So Let's move on to the Secura Penta. You can see here, if we compare it to the Penta, there's really not much to say, because it's just a flat upgrade. The damage is higher, the magazine is better, the fire rate is doubled. That is very important to note, actually. The fire rate being doubled means that this thing can pump out its grenades twice as fast. And that was really the only downside I could see with the Penta, was that you have a 1 shot per second fire rate. So let's build this thing. Now, of course, this has 3 delightful polarities, so we're going to need the D and dash polarities here for cryo rounds and Hell Chamber and Hellfire, respectively. But let's start, as always, with Serration, Split Chamber, and for once, as it is an explosive weapon, we're going to stick on a Firestorm, as the increase in blast radius is simply an increase in the amount of enemies you're going to be killing. This weapon will almost certainly pump out lethal damage for almost all enemies in its area of effect, unless you're up against something protected by a healer. I'll get back to that later. So, there it is, cryo rounds, Hellfire, and let's finish this off with a heavy caliber, actually. Now, heavy caliber won't overly affect this weapon, as its base accuracy is 100. So, to test this out, I thought, let's go up against an enemy that doesn't have a weakness to blast. We don't want Venus, we want Europa. So we're going to go up against Forward, as he is a lovely boss to just pump rounds into and see how much damage it does to him. This Forward will be level 23 to 28, so he should be a fair challenge for this weapon. I doubt it'll kill him in 1 shot, but probably inside of a clip. So, as I mentioned earlier, this weapon does a radiation proc, which whilst leveling it I realised makes it probably the most effective of the syndicate bombs, as that radiation proc is guaranteed on every enemy inside the area of the syndicate bomb, and will mean that the enemies attack each other, meaning the only thing explosive weapons has trouble dealing with, which is healers and their Orokin counterparts, are effectively rendered useless by the radiation proc, meaning that they are going to be attacking each other. To put that slightly better, if you're shooting at a crowd of enemies and there's a healer in them, it's very likely that the healer's going to absorb the majority of the damage you're throwing at them, and those enemies won't die. But if you get a Cindy Bomb that irradiates all of them, that healer will not be protecting those enemies, and an explosive weapon will be extremely effective against the crowd. This on its own, I would say, makes the weapon better than the Penta and Ogress. Probably not better than Tonka, as the Tonka has that delightful crit chance and crit damage. But the Cindy Bomb really does make this a different weapon entirely to the other explosive weapons. Missed there. Okay, that was a remarkably low amount of damage. Well, we can see this chunking away at Forward, but not really doing the damage I was expecting. I, of course, hit myself with the Penta. It should be noted that the Penta, just like the Secura Penta, just like the regular one, you can kill yourself with by detonating the bomb too early, and of course you do need to manually detonate the grenades, or wait, I believe it's 5 seconds for them to go off. Okay, this is really taking far too long, considering what my Tigris did to this thing just a couple of days ago. But there we go. That was a little disappointing, actually. However, having fired this thing at the crowds in between me and the boss, we can see it is very effective against them. It's doing remarkably little damage to these infested. Which is curious to me, because I leveled up this weapon on a Dark Sector defense, and it was clearing waves of infested extremely easily. Anyhow, that's going to require more experimentation to figure out exactly what's going on there. Maybe I don't know about how Forward's armor type interacts with explosive damage. Regardless, these two new weapons are looking to be forward many, many times, although probably the Telos Boltor is just going to be shelved. So I should get to that. Thank you for watching. I'm Bliznub, and this is the Secura Penta, which is probably the second best explosive weapon in the game at the moment. Thank you for watching.